This season on the art and science of complex sales, we're thrilled to present Tales from the Front Lines, a season developed for the leaders shaping the future of complex sales. We're bringing you straight into the action with the C-suite, VPs of sales, sales development experts, and top-performing sales execs who are redefining success in the B2B world. These are the trailblazers that are tackling tough sales cycles, coaching sales champions, and aligning teams to deliver exceptional results. So join us as we unpack the hard lessons, the breakthrough moments, and the invaluable insights from the best in the business. It's more than a podcast, it's a guide to growing revenue with confidence. So let's get started.
Let's get rolling. All right. Today we're talking with Andrew Barbuto. Andrew is still out there carrying a bag, crushing quota. He is a digital media sales leader and an ad tech expert, and he's author of Top Sales Producer, How to Crush Your Sales Quota. Over the past 8 years, he's driven over $250 million in revenue and consistently been a top performer in his organizations. He has taken that and he's put it into a book for other top performers out there or other people on their sales journey. And so today he's here to share those strategies that help him achieve these remarkable results. So let's get going with Andrew Barbuto. Andrew, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. No, I'm really pumped about this. You got a great story and I can't wait to tell it. Can't wait for you to tell it. But first off, what part of the world are you in right now?
So I live in Hoboken, New Jersey.
Hoboken, New Jersey. Are you a lifelong East Coast?
I am a lifelong East Coast. Yes, I grew up in New York on Long Island. I went to school in Albany, and now I'm settled in to be a Jersey boy, thanks to the wife.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Is there a difference between New York and New Jersey? Like, is it like a Jersey boy? Is that like a is it like a slur for people in New York, or?
It depends on who you're talking to, I guess. I'm literally right outside the city, though, so it's like hard to call me a true Jersey boy right now, at least. But Hoboken's literally a stone's throw to the city. But I did live in the city for a little while, and it is very different living in Hoboken versus living in Manhattan. That's for sure.
Gotcha. Well, let's dive into, and then your whole career, professional career. Have you been selling your whole professional career, or did you?
Yeah. I mean, I've been selling. I've my first couple of years out of school, I basically started from the bottom, and I did I was an associate, then I was an account manager, and I worked my way into sales. So not technically selling right out of school. I tried, but they said you got to start from the bottom and then work your way up. But other than that, I've been selling my whole.
Well, let's dive into that. Let's talk through that journey. And where did you? So you started right out of college, and you started as an associate in sales. What did that entail? Is that essentially an SDR, sales development rep role, or?
No. So an associate. So I work in digital media. So an associate at my company. What it meant was essentially doing everything that nobody else wanted to do. I basically lived in Excel. I was keeping track of budgets, literally doing the grunt work, like doing things like most of the time, just like pulling reports and stuff like that. Right. So no client interaction at all, just all behind the scenes. But I'll tell you, as terrible as it was, because I think that most people's first job out of college is terrible. I think that it serves a really good purpose, and it's laid the foundation for the rest of my career. And so what I mean by that is what I was doing was essentially what goes on behind the scenes from what I'm selling, right? So everything, I got to see all angles of what goes into, these campaigns that I was selling. And so although it was the grunt work, it was a unique perspective, because in this day and age, especially with complex sales, you have to really thoroughly understand what you're selling. So that way you can speak as an expert, because that's just a critical part of being in sales today, right? Like, you need to educate your clients. And so by doing that grunt work and really getting a behind the scenes look, it allowed me to simplify complex topics and speak from experience, which I wouldn't have gotten otherwise, right? So when people go right into an SDR role, you're doing sales, but you're selling something where it's hard to do without, having that hands-on experience previously. And so that's what one of the things I've observed is that in my industry, the best salespeople tend to be the ones that started out as an account manager, people that have hands-on keyboard, that actually were in the platforms, and then worked our way into sales. Because it is so complex, it's not a situation where sales is sales. You need to really thoroughly understand it. And so because of that, I feel like that's helped me out a lot in my career.
Let's dive into that. So we talk a whole lot about complex sales, and let's dive into specifically your industry. What makes it complex? If you just don't mind just diving in and
absolutely
kind of laying that foundation.
Sure. So digital media, there's really, I could split this into two different groups. When I first started out in my career, my first job was just selling what is called managed services solutions. Essentially what that means is that we are running digital media campaigns, paid digital media campaigns on behalf of clients. We are the ones who are doing everything, white glove service from beginning to end. They basically give us goals. We set the campaign up, we run the campaign, we optimize it, we provide reporting. That is a completely different sale versus the second company, which is my current company, which is called Basis. And what I do now is selling the software that I was previously using on behalf of clients. So it's a software sale. Mm-hmm. And we do both, but a large part of my focus has been on selling the software. And so what makes it complex, especially selling software, it's more complex. Even though they're both complex, you need to really understand there's an entirely different language in digital media. Like there's more acronyms than you could possibly imagine. So you need to not only understand it, but you need to know what you're talking about. You need to be able to talk through a million different scenarios that could come up, right? And it's not a situation where it's a transactional buy. These are long-term relationships that we're trying to build. And so we need to not just make sure that the client buys, we need to make sure that they continue to be happy. And any number of fires could come up during the course of our partnership. And you have to jump in there, and the best salespeople can put those fires out. But the way that you could put those fires out, the only way is by really understanding what's going on with them. So if a campaign is going wrong for whatever reason, maybe there was a mistake with creatives or something like that, it'd be very difficult to solve that issue other than just working on the relationship unless you knew what exactly went wrong, why it went wrong, and how you could prevent it from happening again. Mm-hmm. So that's one element of it. The other element is software. So any software sale is going to be extremely complex because not only do you have to sell the software, but you have to onboard the software. And there's a different buying model. So this is moving from more of a transactional, let me make your life as easy as possible relationship to let me help make you as profitable as possible. And so that's a completely different process. There's a lot of change management and multiple stakeholders involved. And there's an onboarding process where not only do you need to sell them the software, but they also need to be able to use the software and be happy and be able to be self-sufficient. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of different elements in that.
Do you, in your model specifically, do you sell and onboard, or do you sell and then hand off to a team?
So technically I sell and hand off to a team, mm-hmm. but the reality is a little bit more complicated than that, right? Okay. So I do make the sale. I do hand it over to the team. The team does take over as the main point of contact, but I don't go away, especially in the software sale. I've never been one to go away, and I've always been confused as to why salespeople do that. Although I know that you need to focus on new business, it's important. But you just spent 2 years working on this relationship. You built all this trust, and the deal is finally closed. And then you're going to say, okay, these are the people you're going to be working with now. Thanks so much for your business, right? Yeah. That has never jived with me. I want to maintain a relationship.
So what's your typical client size then? Are you going after like Fortune 500,000? What in general is the demographics?
I'm not going to generalize. It does range. It could be any range from my biggest client, $100 million, right, to $5,000, right? But I will say that in general, it's somewhere in that middle range on average. So anywhere from 2 million to 10 million mid-size, that tends to be our bread and butter.
Is that deal size or their revenue size?
So their revenue size, I would put it at somewhere between, let's call it 5 million to 50 million.
Okay, great.
And then, deal size really does range pretty dramatically. Like I said, 100 million to 5,000, but on average, it's usually 6 figures, call it.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. I'm just trying to set the stage for some of the really interesting work that I think you've done. Let's also tie into, so how many buying centers are there in the organizations that you're working with? Like how many people of influence do you have to deal with at any one given sale?
I would say that there's two main categories of clients for me. And the one category would be like a small to mid-size agency. That's why I primarily sell to media agencies. And for those, there's usually one center, right? Where there is, if you're, depending on the size of the agency, I could be dealing with a CEO who makes those decisions, right? And then as you work your way up, the bigger the agency tends to be more centers. Sometimes there's more buying decision makers involved. So there tends to be a single driving force or the champion, which is more usually like a VP level. But then they have to sell to their boss. Sometimes there's financial and procurement involved. And then usually they're not the people who actually use what they're buying. So they have a team. And so you have to involve all the different team. And then even deeper than that, there's different positions within those companies that are affected in different ways. They use the software in different ways. And so it could be pretty complex. At the most complex, there could be dozens. You won't even be able to find the decision maker because they're so big. Like we're talking about like agency holding companies, which have like tens of thousands of employees. Those are very difficult to navigate versus small, which is much easier because you really, the person that you're making it that makes the key decision.
Well, and why I'm diving on this is because I think you made a very interesting choice in the past what, year to year and a half, which is, hey, you're a top performer. You're working real hard at your agency and you're making things happen and top performing rep. And you made this decision that you were going to document everything. And then it kind of took a turn as well into even more. So tell me about like that decision, like when did you make this decision to document your methodology and how you're working? And then what has that transformed into since you made that decision?
Yeah. So I think in the back of my head, I always have wanted to write a book at some point in my life. I didn't know when. I was a journalism minor. Turns out there's not a ton of money in journalism. So I ended up going the safer route with business. But, I do enjoy the process of writing. I feel like I'm a good writer. So there's one element of it. The other element is what it started at is me documenting all of the processes that I use from beginning to end. And a core reason why I did that is because I realized over time that I tend to use the same process from beginning to end. And there are multiple steps involved in it. And I wanted to just put it in a consolidated document where I could literally walk through, okay, this is what I do, this is what I do, this is what I do, all the way through from beginning to end. And so I started writing them out. And what I quickly realized was it breaks down into 10 key steps, starting from your very first day in sales all the way through making the sale. In fact, I know I mentioned this to you. I wrote the book starting in March, and within a month and a half, mostly stream of conscious, I wrote 120,000 words, which is usually big enough for 2 books. And I did that in like a month and a half. So it turned into 2 books. And so where it broke out is the first part is the sales process. And then the second part is the post-sale process, which is still a big part of what I do. And I know a lot of sales folks, they don't go away. A lot of times they have to manage the relationship and such. And so the last thing I'll say here is when I first started in sales, I really was expecting to receive some sort of sales training. Now I got product training, but that's not quite the same thing as sales training. And so I had to do a lot of self-teaching. And the way I did that was from reading books, interviewing sales reps, and then applying what I learned. And so there was a pretty significant learning curve, as I'm sure there is for many salespeople. And so I pretty much wrote the book that I wish that I had when I first started with the benefit of hindsight, 8 years experience. I consolidated into one document, which basically says this is how it starts. Your first day in sales. What do you do?
Yeah, I find your journey fascinating there because it's interesting. I work with a lot of sales partners and trainers and consultants and transformation specialists, and there's a lot of different names for what we do across the world. And you're one of the very few that I've seen that has, okay, I'm an active rep. I love what I'm doing. I'm still out there crushing it every day, but I got to figure out a way to help others succeed. And that's one of the fascinating points to me on this journey with you, is that you're still active, you're still working. So how did you do that? Like, how are you still out there hitting numbers, working deals, and writing book? Is that like from 12 to 2 in the morning, or?
Well, not getting much sleep these days, because I think that what I'm quickly learning is that, or what I quickly have learned, is that there's a reason why most sales books are not written by active salespeople. There's a ton that goes into it. And, when I wrote that book in a month and a half, I was like, oh, I'm pretty good. But I didn't realize that was just like taking notes, like the whole part of making it into something that's legible that people are going to want to read, and the editing process. It's a ton of work. And so how have I done it? I'm pulling at least one all-nighter per week, waking up at 4 a.m, doing it before work. And then I'm literally working through the night. And as crazy and as, nuts as that sounds, it actually, it's been a good experience for me. The nighttime is also the only time that no one else is awake, right? So I'm not getting pinged and stuff like that. So, but it's been a good experience for me, because what it's allowed me to do is we get caught up in our day to day, but we don't typically slow down and try to dissect, well, why do we do the things that we do? And so that's what this has allowed me to do, is really solidified the things that I have been doing and really making it into a process. And so when you break things down into step 1, step 2, step 3, it makes things like the big picture a lot more clear. That's what my goal was. And that's what I feel like I've done a good job of, is really turn it into a process that anybody can use.
Have you ever read the Checklist Manifesto?
I have not, but I do make to-do lists every day, which is really weird. I literally have to-do lists, 30 to-do lists a day. Like it's crazy.
Well, it's a great book. You should you should read it. It might influence what you're doing too. Our founder actually turned me on to it. Our founder is named George Brontin. He's a brilliant guy. And it was one of the reasons he got fascinated in how we change behavior and how we reinforce behavior, as well as he got really fascinated in his own self journey about why he kept on hiring and firing salespeople. And it came down to a very similar conclusion, Andrew, to what you're making, which is salespeople are made, right? We need to be able to outline the methodology and process by which most people can operate, give them the flexibility within that, but outline that well, so you're not continuously searching for it. Because you notice, I've noticed that every good salesperson really sees it as an art and a science. They want to get down to they really want to get down to the numbers and the metrics of how they're operating and how to optimize. But the Checklist Manifesto was recommended to me by him. And it really it's a cool exploration. And there's a couple of different stories in there, and I hope I'm not misquoting it. But so, for example, like every great profession has gotten itself to a point where it needs to start to make processes and mold those. Like, you look at medical operating rooms, you look at a pilot, a pilot is not going to get up there without a checklist of very specific things to do. You look at builders and engineers and those type of things. So it's one of those things, once we start to take sales really, really seriously and understand that science part, the conclusions that you came to in writing this book are pretty fascinating to me, because you came to it on your own, right? And there's a lot of other people that have come to that in similar ways. Now, there is a question in all of this, and not just me rambling, but so let's take out those processes. And you say there's 10, you have 10. Why don't you, if you don't mind, let's not go into the whole book. If you don't mind talking through a couple of the key areas that you're finding are really helping you perform, that could help others perform, that you documented in your book. I'd love to dive into those.
Totally. And there's one quick point on something that you said. Like, one of the lines in the book is, I'm trying to turn the art of sales into a science. And what I mean by that is, there are common human elements of every sale that, there is the psychology of sales, which is the human to human interaction. And then there's the science, which is the numbers game. And so I found that there are things that I have been doing in every sale, which is the psychology part, that anybody can do. They're not unique necessarily. And so I try to outline those in the book. The other thing I'll say is, while I agree that I do think that you can make salespeople, I'm evidence of that. Most people, nobody's a salesperson when they're born, right? I do think that the attitude is something that would be very difficult to teach.
Amen. Mindset 100% is, you need to coach like crazy on that. And you have to, if you don't coach on that, and if you do coaching on that, you need to, with coachable people.
Yeah, you need to.
I am 100% in line with you on that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think that you can, like, if I was looking for something in a salesperson, I would look for the attitude first, because if somebody's willing to learn, then they can be taught, but they need to apply the learnings, and they need to continue to stick it out when it gets hard, because sales is one of the most difficult professions there is. Not anybody can do it.
Yeah. I am boiling down. I'm trying to name, I have a lot of great partners that work in this. One of them is Objective Management Group. They have a fantastic assessment that dives in and kind of names some of these skill sets and mindsets, things like need to be liked, or they have ability to discuss money as a mindset, right? Their own buying motivations and their own habits. I'm trying to put one name, and they call that the sales DNA, and it's actually really, really good. But I am trying to name like one more. There's one more that is hitting me really lately, and it's really dives into two. It's this positive persistence, that ability to be positively persistent, right? And just not to give up, to know when to let things go, but don't give up, right? You just have your point when you let things go. That's very different than giving up. And then the second is courage. And it's this. It's funny that when you say higher mindset, I would much rather that courage right out of the gate. When you can come into an organization and say, yeah, okay, good. I can have a conversation. I'm not scared to have a conversation. I'll do it with anybody, from the CEO of this organization down. That is such a good mindset. And it's such, even if you're uncomfortable, it's a mindset that you find great salespeople are like, all right, let's go. Anyhow, I'm talking too much. Let's talk about like some of these specific things that you and a couple of the processes that you're working through, because I really want to give your book the airtime, not my thoughts.
No, it's okay. I love talking about this stuff. And speaking of names, coming up with a name for the book was one of the most challenging things I think I've ever done. I took hours and hours and hours. I reached out to a lot of people. Everyone had different opinions. It turns out it's a very personal thing. But I settled on Top Sales Producer, How to Crush Your Sales Quota. And I think it's a fitting name because there's two elements of it, right? There's the top sales producer part of it, which is obviously like a rainmaker. And then there's How to Crush Your Sales Quota. Those are two different things, right? Because as we know, the longer that we're in sales, the bigger the numbers get. And so there's the multiple elements of it. You could be a huge top sales producer, but if your number's astronomical, you need to be set up for success. So every year you need to be set up for success, and we can't do this alone. So you need to be selling something that will deliver, and you need a support team, and all of that goes into it. But to answer your
point, all right, I got to take you off the book day, because when you say set up for success, there's a whole lot that goes into that, right? So there's product, there's people, there's the ability to get the resources you need to manage up, and those type of things. What are some of the key things that you're speaking of when you talk about setup for success?
Yeah, well, it's those things you just mentioned, right? So product, selling something that you believe in, that will perform, that will make clients happy. If you're not selling something that will keep clients happy, then you're going to be having a lot of headaches, and you won't have very high client retention. And it's just not sustainable in my business to just continue to win clients over if there's 100% churn, right? So you want to continue to work with those clients, build those long-term relationships. So that's one. Number two is the people, being able to get the support, because you can't do this alone as a salesperson. In my industry, I'm not the person who is hands-on keyboard. So I need a good team who is hands-on keyboard in those scenarios, or people that are good at training and onboarding to help the accounts reach their full potential, and to free up my time, right? Because if I'm constantly being pulled into this situation, I can't rely on the team, then I'm not going to have any time to sell. So that's two. The three is the company, the culture. Getting the support of your company is critically important. So I've worked in sales organizations and I worked in non-sales organizations. And there's a very big difference from that. The main difference is, do you get the resources that you need to be successful as a salesperson? Are you getting continuous content that you can then use in your prospecting? Are you, when there's things that come up, we have to go out of process, which, as we know, happens all the time. Who wins in that situation, right? We have minimum spend levels, to give you one example. Oftentimes, clients don't feel comfortable committing to the minimum spend levels. Certain organizations, that's hard and fast. You're not going to be able to sell this in if they don't reach their minimums. I'm lucky to work in an organization where there's flexibility, where we say, hey, this isn't a client that won't feel comfortable committing to the full amount. They want to do a test. They want to test the water before they go all in, but there's opportunity here. They will work with me, and I know that I can get that done. Mm-hmm. So situations, that's pre-sale. Post-sale would be if there's minimums and a client doesn't hit those minimums, right? You could enforce the penalty on those clients. A company could make you enforce them and potentially burn the relationship. Or you could do what I do, which is go to battle and just say, listen, we don't want to enforce this. This is a good client. Circumstances happen that are out of their control. And we want to give them a pass. And every time I get the opportunity to do that. And I'll give you a quick example. Last year, I spent 2 years pursuing this account, and we finally get them on the platform. They are not the typical client because they work with a category kids, which there are regulations. You can't do a ton of what we do, which is programmatic. And so what ended up happening was they were a little hesitant for that reason to sign on to a contract. They ended up coming up well short of the minimum spend level. And, it wasn't their fault. I explained the situation to my company and said, want to give them a pass. I kind of knew this going in, this was a potential risk. But it's not, they don't want to cancel the contract. They just weren't able to hit the minimum. So what we were able to do was to switch them on to another platform, which didn't have minimums. And luckily for me, they ended up spending more than they ever have, right? It just happened to be in a different circumstance where things worked out. Mm-hmm. And so when I say a sales organization, I'm talking about an organization that will support the salespeople, empower them to be the very best they can for their clients. And me, I'm very customer centric. That's literally what I hang my hat on. It's everything I believe in. And so I'm lucky to work at a company who's also very customer centric. And it's something that is ingrained in an organization.
Well, there's an interesting thing there. Like, to gain trust, you need to be trustworthy, right? So it sounds like you're in an organization where you can bring trusted information, where you can bring information that is, they know you've worked it. They know you have the customer and their interest in mind, not just a commission check, right? And then that's I think that's a lesson there, that it's just that sales culture is built by having individuals like you that can go back and provide that trustworthy information so you can continually drive that. I mean, it's not the sole reason that's built, but it is one of them, right? Because when you trust when you're able to do that, but still bring in really good business, and maybe you get a referral out of it. Maybe you get a long-term relationship, you get a customer. That's critical to win.
Yeah. And that's a big thing, is building that trust both internally and externally. And the approach that I take is that I'm very open, I'm very transparent about it, right? I know as a salesperson, oftentimes the salespeople, because we're part of the entire process from beginning to end, right? We basically raised this from nothing, right? We know what the real opportunity is. We know what the circumstances is. We know if there's actually potential or if it's just really more like a one-off situation. And I try to be as open and transparent as I can about what is going into the relationship with my team. And I've proven to be trustworthy in that respect, where I'm not going to overhype something. If I don't think that there's a real opportunity, I'll say, hey, this is a test. If it doesn't go well, then we're not going to get any more of this money, right? And I feel like that's something that's really important, is managing expectations. If you're somebody that continues to ask for these things and it doesn't come to fruition, then you're going to lose that trust. And then they're not going to want to help you out next time. It's like the boy who cried wolf.
Well, that goes to that customer-centric selling and that true ability to discover across all areas of the business and form that relationship. So let's dive into that portion of what you do. So like your pipeline opportunity, your pipeline sales project, you're starting to work with the organization. How are you really starting to dive in with them, understand their business, understand the ins and outs in a way that can make you a trusted partner to both them and your business?
Yeah. So, I think that what's really critically important is kind of what I was alluding to at the beginning of this with respect to being an expert. It does take time. It's not something that you could just be overnight. You do have to do some faking it until you make it at first. But the more and more wins that you have, the more experience you get, you kind of see it all at some point. And, I think there's only so many scenarios and things come up from time to time. But regardless, I've gotten to a place where I have with my ideal customer profile, I know very much what the ins and outs of their business is like. I think part of that is also because I came from a holding company, which had other media agencies that were a part of it. We were a subsidiary of it. So we weren't technically a media agency, but I saw the inner workings of it. And then part of that is just from experience working with them so often. What my process is and what I would advise to anybody who's really getting into a new business, I know how challenging it is when you're starting out. It is an extremely hard thing to do, especially when you don't have the experience, the stories to reference, and the internal is another whole other thing, which is you need to understand how the inner workings of your company, how it works from start to end, right? That's a whole other thing. So how do I get into it? I'll start with the internal and then I'll do the externals. So I'm starting at a new company. What is my process? My process is to learn as much as I can on my own. So devour through all of the resources that I'm provided from the company, right? There's always onboarding material. I will read through all of that. Once I'm done and I've learned everything I can on my own, then I will meet with my other sales colleagues. And this is something that I think is been a huge impact on my success in my career is continuously learning from others that have been there and that have done it. I will meet with every one of my teammates, and then I will branch out to other team members from different teams. Specifically, I'll look for top people that are performing really well. And I will reach out to them and I will pick their brain. I'll come with questions and say, how did you do it? What have you done? What has worked for you? It's been how I've learned some really just valuable insights that I've applied in my job. Once I'm, done there, then I'll move on to my direct team, my support team. I want to understand what they do. I want to get their perspective on why they think clients like working with us. I want to understand all of the inner workings of what goes into it, so I know what I'm selling. If I'm selling a product, I want to be using that product on a regular basis. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, for me, it's like we're digital media buying software. So I'm not out there setting up campaigns and like launching advertising, right? Mm-hmm. But I am going into the platform and regularly, poking around in there, navigating around it, right? I want to know how to use it so I know what I'm getting myself into when I'm speaking to clients. How can you speak to a client about what their experience is like if you've never done it yourself? So that's another key thing for me is I want to be in there. I want to be taking all the trainings that my clients are taking. That's one of the things that I don't really see people doing is, we preach, hey, take these trainings, but have you taken them? If not, how do you know if they're long, if they work or whatnot? Anyways, so that's my next step. After that, I want to meet people cross-functionally. So as salespeople, we work with every department, right? So I want to meet anybody I'm going to be working with, build relationships, right? Finance, legal, marketing, everybody, right? At some point, you're going to be working with all of them. So it's important that you have good relationships with them and you understand what they do, because you need to have a 360-degree view of your business. So that way, when you do get an opportunity, you know what comes next. You need a thorough understanding of your sales cycle. And so in a nutshell, that's really the process I use. And then I come with questions that are specific to each one of those departments, right? So salespeople, I want to ask them about what is the onboarding process typically like? What have you done that's been successful? What is our sales cycle like? What are some of our competitors? What are our main objections, questions? What are some of the roadblocks I could run into? With my support team, I want to know, hey, what do you like working with account executives? What are some of the things you like? What are the things you don't like? What are your expectations of me? What are some of our clients that I need to be aware of? What is the opportunity? Those type of questions. And then cross-functionally, I just want to understand where I go for certain things when they come in and really build a relationship there. That's the core of my, how do I get acquainted with an organization? And it does take time.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I've not ever heard a producer outline their process for doing that well. So that's fantastic. That's even that right there is worth buying the book and reading it. You can then take that, you're getting onboarded, you're understanding people, and now you're actually working with a client. Have you processized that, like how you dive in and understand the projects?
Yeah, so there's two parts to that, right? The first part is the new business element, and it's how do you build a book of business from scratch? Let's say you inherit nothing, which happens, and it's not ideal, but it happens. And if it's your first job in sales, then it's not like you can call on your old clients. You don't have the network, connections. So where do you start? Well, where I would start is, well, you may not have had other clients before, but your company probably has. And so I'm diving deep into my CRM, and I'm looking at any clients that used to work with us that no longer do. A client used to work with us, they're a qualified company. Who knows why they stopped working with you? But guess what? There's a new sheriff in town. And, a lot of times it's just because maybe they didn't get the TLC that they needed, right? Maybe it was because you didn't have an offering that you now have or integrations that you now have. Companies evolve over time. Maybe the customer support was poor. So I would start there, which is I'm going to take a look at any accounts that used to work with us that no longer do and see. I'll start from most recent and then work my way back. I'll look at how much they spend and work my way back. That's where I would start. From there, I would branch out to my network. And so even if it's your first sales job, you have a network because you know people, right? There's the law of 7, right? We're all connected in some way by 7 individuals. So I'm talking about people that you went to school with, right? People are always happy to help out people that went to school with, I just recently got a really strong industry connection because I was going through my LinkedIn and I noticed that one of the people that was in my college program, happened to be working at one of my ideal customer profile companies. And I reached out, got a conversation going, and we've been developing a mutually beneficial relationship ever since. So I would dive into that. I would also look at my colleagues' LinkedIns and my manager LinkedIn. This is one of the tactics that I use, which is you may not have a big network, but chances are your manager does. So take the time to go through their LinkedIn, see all the people that they're connected with, try to identify ones that could potentially be good customers for you, and then ask them if they would be willing to reach out to them if they know them well enough. And the same thing could apply to your colleagues. If they've been in the game for a while, maybe there's an account that's assigned to you and they may know somebody over there. I work in a small industry. And so that's a good potential use case of finding a cold prospect and turning them into a warm lead, which is what I try to do. And I outline various tactics to doing that in my book.
That's awesome. That is awesome. No, and please, for everybody on the podcast, again, the name of your book and where they find it. I think is it pre-release or did you just release it right now?
I just put the finishing touches on it.
Nice.
It will be available for pre-order next month. It's called Top Sales Producer: How to Crush Your Sales Quota.
So this is October when we're recording it. We're actually probably releasing it at the end of this month. So this is perfect. So right around November, that'll be great. And then if people are interested, do they just go search for that on Amazon? Do they just reach out to you? How do you want them to interact?
Yeah, so they can go to my website, andrewbarbuto.com, sign up for the waitlist. They'll be made aware as soon as it's available. It will be available everywhere that books are sold, so they'll be able to find it on Amazon. They'll see it on pre-order. Chances are by the time this is out, it will be available on pre-order. You just need to search for Top Sales Producer: How to Crush Your Sales Quota, and it'll be a white cover with red letters, and the sales quota will be what is supposed to be smashed or crushed.
Nice. Well, yeah, I want to give you huge props, just in terms of writing this, taking the time to write it, but also getting those things down there that ultimately I think you're helping people own their own careers and not just be onboarded by onboarded by a process, and that's all I get. I mean, those what you were talking about was owning yourself, your career, your ability to make things happen, and this tool will be very helpful for people. So great work, man.
Thank you. Yeah, and that was another thing that was motivating for me is I could go the sales manager route, but in the best case scenario, you're working with one person, and even if I was working with one person, it would take so long to teach everything that I know, right? So the only way that I could get everything down and have basically people learn all of the things that there is to know in sales, which is surprisingly a lot of information, is an unlimited amount of scenarios. A book was the only way.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. It's cool you had the courage to write it, and then it's getting out there. And again, big props. Hey, everybody, we're going to sign off for today. Please take a look at Andrew's website, pre-register for the book. I get nothing for saying that other than I think you're going to get a great resource from a really quality individual. So make sure you do that. Yeah, and we talked about the art and the science today of the complex sale. So pumped to fulfill that promise for you. And everybody keep shining bright. Have an amazing day. And until next time, we'll see you later.
Hey, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Art and Science of Complex Sales. I hope today's conversation provided you with valuable insights and practical ideas to help you and your team elevate the profession and succeed in today's complex world. This podcast is brought to you by Membrain.com. Membrain is the B2B growth platform for CEOs, sales leaders, and sales executives who are committed to sustainable growth and change. If you enjoyed this episode, do us a favor, like, subscribe, share it with your network. Your support really helps us bring more valuable insights from the best in the business straight to you. Also, check us out at Membrain.com. We're more than a technology. Membrain equips your teams with the expert coaches and trainers, amazing sales methodologies, process, people, and tools to continually improve and coach results. More than a CRM, it's a network, and it's designed to help your team execute with confidence, smash goals, and overall up your sales game. So we'll see you next time for another episode of The Art and Science of Complex Sales. And until then, as always, keep shining bright.